Thank you to Sangam Talks. So let me begin by sharing with you what is the purpose and the objective for today's talk. The purpose for the talk is basically, people are talking about climate change and how fossil fuels, coal economy, plastics, cement, steel, how they are degrading our land, our soil, our waters, and our air. Uh, so basically, what I want to do as an objective for the talk is it is a given climate change is here and people are forecasting a dystopian future for us. But we should not let that alarm us. What we should do is, as young entrepreneurs, whether you're young, old, or anybody in between, everybody should become an entrepreneur to counter this particular challenge that we are facing. Take a positive attitude, and as Gandhiji said, you know uh, if you change yourself, then you can change the world. So don't look at other countries or what is happening in other places and say, oh, they are not doing enough, so why should I bother? I think that would be an error in judgment. So my focus today is really providing a lot of entrepreneurial ideas that fit into the framework of a circular and a cultural economy. And so what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is, why cultural economy? Because if you see ancient India, we had like 25 to 28% GDP contribution to the world. Why was it? I mean, they didn't believe in capitalism, socialism, communism, and things like that. They emphasize culture. And what defines culture is basically culture is the outcome of every individual trying to focus their effort on equal emphasis on developing your body, your mind, and your soul. So once you have equal emphasis on all of these three things, then you become a better individual, you create a better society. So culture, in a sense, is the outcome of these particular three aspects on how you focus on them. And that develops either a good ecological culture, a good social culture, a good corporate culture, a good political culture, and so on. By corporate culture, I mean not just giving CSR like 2% philanthropic effort and things like that. Corporate culture should be defined as, how do you create a circular economy? And that defines really, a true way of addressing true economic progress. Now, when I'm going to talk about culture, I will specifically focus my talk on ecological culture, because I want to be narrow in the focus, because whole cultural economy is a vast subject. So I'm going to pick ecological culture as my emphasis. Now, what do we mean by ecological culture? How is ecological culture defined? So if you look at our ancient tradition and the wisdom of India, people focused on the five elements of nature, which is water, air, fire, earth, which is soil, and space. And these were considered as divine manifestations of the creator himself. Uh, so it's not just about worshiping them as a personality in a temple, but really respecting them and honoring them in nature itself. So don't abuse water, don't abuse the air, don't abuse the soil, and so on. Uh, so that is what is defined as an ecological culture. So, what is a circular economy? Circular economy is a model, is a framework or a model that actually fits into the ecological culture. So, in a circular economy, there are two pillars. One is a restorative pillar, and the other one is a regenerative pillar. What do you mean by a restorative pillar? A restorative pillar means, you take any product like a laptop and an iPad, and when its life is over, you take out all the precious metals from them and reuse them. And the plastic, you reuse it for some other thing. That's what is called restorative, complete recycling. So in a circular economy, there is zero waste, essentially, unlike in a linear economic model like fossil fuels and so on, where you take, make, and waste. What is a restorative economy? Restorative pillar of a circular economy is when you create a business model which tries to enrich the soil or the space or the air or the water. So as long as you're trying to enrich one or more of the elements, it is regenerative. So creating a forest is regenerative. For example, in Bhutan, in their constitution, it is written that 60% of their country will be covered with forests. That is written in their constitution. So their constitution can be considered as a regenerative model. Ayurveda can be considered a regenerative model because not only does it improve human health, but also it creates forests, agroforestry, with a lot of sacred and medicinal plants that purifies the air, the soil, the water. So overall, the system is regenerative. And that is what we need to focus on. Unfortunately, in this world, we have very few regenerative models, and I'll get to it eventually. But a lot of, for example, there is one more business in India called Aforest. Aforest, this company tries to encourage people to have forests in their own backyard. So that could be considered a regenerative model. So I want to focus my talk on giving entrepreneurial ideas, no matter where it comes in the world, as long as it fits into the framework of a circular and cultural economy. And let us see how these ideas are relevant to India. But these concepts can be applicable anywhere else as well. So my first point, or my first entrepreneurial idea, as it relates to water, is liquid carbon dioxide. Now, all of us have to wash our clothes, whoever it is, whether we wash it once a week, twice a week, or 3 times a week, we have to wash our clothes. And with 1.4 billion people in India, that's a lot of water we are talking about. So there is a company called Tersus, TERSUS, located in the US. And there is another company called Solvair, SOLVAIR. And they have manufactured a machine which uses liquid carbon dioxide. So what you basically do is when carbon dioxide at high pressure becomes liquid, it washes your clothes. And when the pressure becomes low, it becomes gas again, and it dries your clothes. So one machine which does both the jobs, no use of water, liquid CO2 is biodegradable, non-toxic, and completely recyclable. It's the same CO2 which is used over and over again. I mean, it becomes liquid, then turns to gas. Imagine if such a machine can wash your clothes. If 50 to 100 houses in India have one laundromat, can you imagine the number of people that will be employed? This can be used in hotel industry. This can be used by restaurant industry to wash their dishes. So the employment potential I have calculated, if India were to adopt this all over with the water crisis going on in India, 21 cities are going to run dry. So, you don't have to pay for labor to wash your clothes, or you don't have to pay for tanker waters. I mean, the economics of scale are very important. And don't be surprised, eventually in the future, states will charge money for water based upon tiered pricing. So the higher your water consumption, higher the price you would pay. I mean, I could foresee something like that happening. So we have to be prepared to address these kind of challenges in the future. Liquid carbon dioxide is also used in textile dyeing. I don't know how many of you know, but every 2 pounds of textiles requires 25 to 40 gallons of water, right? And there is a company called Dyecoo, Dyecoo Textile Solutions, that basically has this process where they supply their technology to the textile dyeing industry. So there are many, many ideas of this kind of nature. The other innovation in water, I am focusing right now on textiles only. There is a company called Gally, Gally, based in Boston, Massachusetts. Early next year, they are going to produce cotton. They are growing cotton in a lab. I mean, imagine if all Indians in their garages open a lab and start growing cotton. I mean, this cotton, it takes 18 days to grow in a lab compared to 180 days on the farm. And it uses 80% less water and 80% less land. Uh, so the land that you save, we could be using for other agroforestry projects and so on if we have a fruitarian culture in India, which I will get to it. So imagine the amount of land and water saved by just growing cotton in a lab by microorganisms. The other innovation as it relates to textiles, I want to mention to you is there is a company called QMilk, QMILK, and you can check their website. They take wasted milk from dairy farms and they convert it into textiles. Amazing idea. So any liquid is also water. So essentially, they are using this kind of technology as well. Now let me transition to another broad idea, which is basically, uh, do you know that the leakages that happen in our underground water pipes, can anybody guess how much water is being wasted due to underground pipe leakages in India? I have read on the internet anywhere between 30 to 40% of our water is basically wasted because of leakages. And there is a company called Utilis, Utilis, which uses satellite technology to detect underground water leaks. Now, you can combine this technology with tiny robots developed by MIT and in Netherlands. These robots are the size of tiny marbles, and you have GPS technology inside this marble. So you send this tiny robot inside your underground water pipes, and you can pinpoint exactly the location where the leaks are. And you don't need to break the whole land and everything. You can just dig into that particular place and repair all of these particular leaks in the underground water pipes. There is also a company called Apana, which uses IoT technologies to detect leaks or create water efficiency, in any kind of industrial location or anything like that. So these are innovations related to leaks. And all of these models, I'm not sure whether they exist in India. At least liquid CO2, I know that it does not exist in India at all. Um, for 4 years, I've been writing even to the government to kind of look at it 4 years ago. The next broad innovation I would like to talk about is how to replenish our water, groundwater levels. As you know, groundwater levels are becoming dangerously low in India because we are taking out so much water, but we are unable to replenish this water. And I'm not giving you common ideas which are well known, like water harvesting and so on. For example, all our highways and roads are covered with asphalt, which is again fossil fuel, which is not good for climate change. Um, and it's environmentally bad, as we know, because of its CO2 emissions. So there is a company called Tarmac, Tarmac, and it makes a material called Topmix, Topmix, which is permeable concrete, and it absorbs 880 gallons of water per minute. So you won't have this heavy flooding when we have these flash floods like we have seen in Chennai recently, and in many other places. When you have such permeable concrete on our highways, I mean, it will absorb 880 gallons of water per minute. And we don't have to replace all the highways. Wherever there are potholes and repairs needed, let us use this kind of a material. There are many countries experimenting with permeable type of materials to replenish their groundwater levels. For example, in Australia, they are even trying to research on ground coffee beans. You know, by the way, talking about coffee beans are also being now produced in a lab. So that would also save a lot of water and land, something to look at as well. Uh, the the other entrepreneurial idea is a very personalized entrepreneurial idea that every individual, I believe, can implement in the world, and I'm going to talk about it, is meat that is grown for food. Uh, do you know that 1 kilogram of beef, to make 1 kilogram of beef, you need 15,500 liters of water? Even Vinod Khosla is talking about it on his YouTube. And that's a lot of water, by the way. I mean, so red meat especially takes a lot of water and land, and it is very high resource consumption. I know from an India perspective, you might say, oh, the meat consumption is not so bad, but we have been exporters of meat. As a matter of fact, if you see that the indigenous cow, Bos indicus, it has become a vanishing breed in India, and even in countries like United States, where things are a vanishing breed, like the horse, it's a federal crime in the United States to kill a horse for its meat. So nobody would do that. But so sometimes we have so much freedom, but we need to keep some context on how, as a society, and how as a culture, we need to protect the environment. um, about 50% to 2/3 of the land, whichever statistics you're looking at, land and water, are being used exactly for meat production. The number of livestock that is killed globally is much more than the human population. Uh, I just want to mention something. There is an aquifer called Ogal Alla, Ogallala, which is the world's largest fossil aquifer, 450,000 square kilometers. It is under 6 of the states in United States. And if all the water were to be taken out from that aquifer, it will cover entire United States about 6 feet deep. So that's the amount of water. And 13 trillion gallons of water are being taken out of this aquifer every single year, and most of it is going for meat production. Meat is being exported even to China. China's meat consumption has doubled in the last 10 years. So Amazon forest is being cleared to grow beans and so on. So bottom line, to make my point, even human digestive anatomy, in all its aspects, it has not only been mentioned by our seers and saints hundreds of years ago, but even Western scientists have now validated it, and there is a lot of scientific proof. that human digestive anatomy is more plant-based. Our teeth, jaw structure, our intestinal length is all different from carnivores. Even the pH acid in our stomach is much weaker than carnivores. Even the gut bacteria, the gut microbiome, the diversity and composition is different in vegetarians versus the non-vegetarians. So there is an anatomical aspect to it. But there is a positive trend that is going on. Like even in United States, plant-based foods that taste just like meat, Beyond Meat, Impossible Burger, and so on. These are completely plant-based, but they taste like meat. And these entrepreneurs, you can listen to their podcast, they have been driven by the enthusiasm to come out with alternatives that taste like meat for the meat lovers. So they feel, and they were driven by climate change as a big factor in their decision to become entrepreneurs in this area. So something that India can think about. The other thing India can think about is in the livestock industry, once we slaughter and everything, the leather industry or the footwear industry is extremely polluting to the groundwater, including the meat industry in general. And a lot of toxic materials are used. I want you to look at one company called Modern Meadow. Modern Meadow. And I would like you to listen to the talk given by Susan Lee. She says, biofabrication, the next industrial revolution. She's the chief creative officer of this company, and she's an interior designer or an architect, something like that. And she went into microbiology and everything, and Modern Meadow creates leather in a lab using microorganisms. So think about it. In an ocean or in a sea, it is bacteria that create the coral reefs. So why couldn't this bacteria also create leather or anything that you want? Even big companies, tire companies are using lab grown rubber and things of that nature. So there is a lot of saving in water, and it's environmentally friendly. Biology could be the next industrial revolution, just like IT. So let's not lose of sight of that. And there is a lot of entrepreneurial opportunity. Imagine the number of people having pets, even in India or all across the world. There are companies. Go into Google and type cellular agriculture, and you will see there are at least 5 companies manufacturing pet foods in a lab using microorganisms. Something, small entrepreneurs can take up this idea and address the pet industry. So the number of ideas are just plenty in nature, and it's how you capitalize on them. And so that's the idea of my talk, because building a circular economy or building a cultural economy, I don't want to give a theoretical talk. I just want to show you with practical examples on how you can utilize them and apply, and use the Indic lens to see if an idea fits the framework and it is applicable to India or not. That would be the way. The next innovation is in wastewater. Many people think wastewater is yucky. It should just we don't want to even to think about it. But honestly, waste is wealth. That's what a circular economy believes in. Your waste is somebody else's food, things of that nature. I don't know if people are aware, but 538 billion rupees of NPK fertilizer, that is nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus, was imported by India in 2020. And that number is growing. You can get all of these elements from wastewater. There is a company called Clear AS, Clear, CLEAR AS, again based in Montana, USA. And there is another company called Ostara, Ostara, based in Canada. And what they're trying to do is basically using microorganisms and algae and carbon dioxide and so on to extract these particular minerals from wastewater. And in exchange, they also give you clear water and clear air. So these are technologies that we should look at. Go into their websites and just look at these particular things. There is a lot of water also being wasted when we transport vegetables and fruits from point A to point B. The statistics in India are 20 to 30% of the vegetable and fruit is destroyed in transport, right? So there is a company called Apeel Sciences, APEEL Sciences. They have come out with a plant-based spray. You spray it on, it's completely natural, 100% safe and edible. And this plant-based spray, once sprayed on fruits and vegetables, increases the shelf life of the plants and of the fruits and vegetables. So something that you can look at. Just before coming on to the talk, I was telling Aparna ji that there are some hospitals in Kerala, Ayurvedic hospitals. And if you go into these Ayurvedic hospitals, what are their cleaning agents? They don't pollute the water at all. What they do is they use lemongrass oil as a cleaning agent. Why couldn't India start a multinational company just exporting even cleaning agents like lemongrass oil? I mean, there is just so much money to be made in agroforestry and things of that nature, which I'll eventually get to. But those are some of the ideas that I would like to give. I have given a sample of a few ideas, but I do want to talk about air as well because I have every element to cover. So I want to leave you with two thoughts, two important thoughts. And I want you to go into the website and look at it. Imagine H2O is a nonprofit company and they empower entrepreneurs in water, right? There are at least 100 innovations by different entrepreneurs related to water listed on this website. It's a goldmine of information. Look at it and see. And if you have a good idea, they might even fund your idea, right? And there is another company, XPV Partners, X as in X-ray, P as in Peter, V as in Victory, Water Partners. XPV Water Partners is based in Canada. They are like a private equity investment company, investment advisory company. And look at their portfolio of water companies. I think some of the IT people will love it because there are some water informatics companies listed there. And you can see the kind of companies they're supporting, everything related to water. So one thought I want to leave you with water is, why do we call water holy water? Reason we call it holy water is because water has memory. The structure of water also changes. If you keep a glass of water in front of nice music, any music, that structure of a water, after 1 or 2 hours, test it, the molecular structure of that water has changed. I don't know how many of you know of Rustum Roy. Rustum Roy was nominated 21 times for the Nobel Prize. Different story why he didn't win it. But he has done so much research on water that it would just blow your mind. So look at it. So I want to end that on water and why we should respect all the elements. So the next element I'm going to talk about is air. Okay, just give me a few more minutes, and after that I'll take some Q&As. With respect to air, we underestimate our own technologies, right? I don't know how many of you have heard about Vasant Paranjpe. Look at him on the website. He really propagated Agnihotra or Homa therapy. And Agnihotra and Homa therapy has been shown to really purify the air, purify the soil, increase agricultural productivity. Vasant Paranjpe's student by name Ulrich Berk, Ulrichberk, so based in Germany, and his website, International Homotherapy Association, has documented studies on how homotherapy is good for climate change overall and purifying the air and so on. What if an entrepreneur could set up a company, with some pundits who just do Agnihotra, export them to every country in the world or every region in the world? You could be making money while addressing climate change, and you could be doing concomitant studies to show the outcomes. Uh, you know, it's a very simple technology which uses indigenous materials with a copper vessel and done during sunrise and sunset. But there are more. It's an ancient Vedic practice. Uh, the five physical senses would never understand this, but look at the outcome. Outcome is what matters. Like anything else, just measure the outcome. Why does the structure of water change with music? We don't fully understand it, right? So same things. Look at the outcome and then delve into the mysteries of it. And that would be a part of the cultural economy. The next idea on air I want to mention to you is that 1 ton of cement, right? Cement, manufacture of cement not only uses a lot of energy, which is fire, but also releases a lot of carbon dioxide. 1 ton of cement, 1 ton of cement releases 1 ton of carbon dioxide. It's almost equal. I would call this a transitional technology, like Solidia Technologies and LC3. They fit into existing manufacturing plants, but they reduce your CO2 emissions by 40%. Better than this, I like the company called Biomason, Biomason. What Biomason does is basically use bacteria at ambient temperature to make bricks, to make cement. The person, Biomason's founder, experimented with all this in her garage. And as I told you before, if coral reefs can be made with bacteria, you can use bacteria. So don't forget biofabrication, cellular agriculture, microbiology, all of these things have great promise within the framework of circular economy. The way to look at it is, in a linear economic model, true economic progress, we kind of fell down the ladder when it comes to climate change, right? So now we have to climb up the ladder. So there will be some transitional technologies where you're not disrupting some existing technologies. Like, for example, Solidia is a transitional technology. At least they're reducing the carbon emissions by 40%. But Biomason goes a step ahead by using bacteria, by using microbes to create cement, to create bricks. There is a company even called Mogu in Italy making floor tiles. There's just ample opportunity when it comes to different innovations. I think I have taken a bit of your time, and what I would like to do is to kind of stop here. I would continue in the second part of my discussions with more innovations related to air and soil and space. But I've given you a whole bunch of information that you can look into and see and further explore. I'm happy to open it up to any questions that people have.
We hear all the time, like, no matter how good an idea, what do you do about the red tapeism and the bureaucracy and the governmental obstacles that will not allow you to grow?
So, so let me address that question. And it's all about um, being inspired with an idea and having the passion to do something. So most of the ideas that I have even mentioned here, it's basically a people initiated economic plan, right? So for example, even when I was talking about a washing machine using liquid CO2, this is an obvious problem. So what tends to happen is we focus on the obscure instead of the obvious problems. Uh, we can develop simple solutions for complex problems rather than complex solutions to simple problems. So I would say that let it not stop you, because ultimately it is the people who define the culture of a society. If you as an individual can improve, um, for example, I just read about Falguni Nair, who started this beauty company called Nykaa, and she started it in 2012, and she's now a billionaire. Uh, so I'm sure she must have faced the same hurdles uh, as anybody else is. So let it not stop you. But because most of my ideas can be done in a small space, small land, leapfrog into the new technologies. Don't look at major mega companies, because innovations are happening in startups. And startups are the future for India as well, and for the youth of India.
My question is actually on a broader level with regard to the innovations that you speak about, which need to be done to save the environment and the climate crisis we're in. How do these innovations fit in with sustainable development? Is it just a word? Are these fitting in with them? That's the first part. And secondly, how doable or implementable are these kind of solutions in countries like India with a large population? With a large population, which is not easy to sort of change behavior patterns often, and cost considerations as well. Would such innovations be more expensive for people to implement in their lives or not?
So what I would say is, as far as sustainability is concerned, um, I think every idea that I mentioned are completely sustainable. So even the washing machine idea, which I gave on liquid CO2, it's a closed loop model, right? Um, why couldn't students coming out of IITs address the major problems of India? Why couldn't we make these machines within India itself? Um, I mean, I don't think it takes much money if equipment is made in India itself to start a laundromat. Three people can open a laundromat. You can have pick up, drop off locations and things like that. So everything starts small and becomes big eventually. Uh, who knows? And that's the way. And some of the ideas which I gave on modern meadow or biomason and things of that nature, all of these people started these things in a garage. Biomason, this person, architect, was experimenting to make bricks in a garage. And now she has contracts from the Middle East and all that. So it is possible. I agree the framework. I agree two things go hand in hand, which is um, support by the government and so on. But when ideas come up, I think government would encourage, and I think the whole world with COP26 and so on going on, uh, everybody is looking on how to address climate change. What are the new innovations? So everything that I'm talking about are the innovations of the future, and it will build equity in wealth, because this is coming down to the ordinary person, average Indian level, who can implement it. Um, Even in Modern Meadow, the person, chief creative officer, she's a fashion designer. She went into microbiology to look at these things and start. Listen to her talk, Biofabrication, the Next Industrial Revolution. It's a fascinating talk by Susan Lee.
The cost factor also, Ramji, cost. How is it? I mean, the ideas are very good, but for at a mass scale in India, and especially now in the last 10, 15 years with this, this whole flooding in of Chinese products and things, there's a whole urban middle class, lower middle class who have all become very used to cheap products, affordable products, whether it is a fridge, whether it is this, it's all become like that. The expectations have come up. So how much of people be able to invest in, say, a little more expensive product to save the environment? And I'm talking cost considerations because they're very important for developing countries. That was the second part of the question.
No, that is true. I think any business, for example, there is a cost consideration. Raising capital is an issue, right? So right now, you have several venture capital firms, you have several private equity firms, you have several ways of financing mechanisms within India where you can raise money. And believe it or not, the entire diamond industry in India is community-based, right? And the community, the family structure raises capital too. So we should not forget that that aspect of it, or the diamond industry. How did all of these things happen, and how did or the entire textile industry, which was in the southern part of India and Tamil Nadu, all of these things came up by community or family structures. But now the private enterprise and equity firms, VC firms, banks and everything have started. So raising finance is not an issue. And all of the technologies that I'm talking about are so new that we can leapfrog into these technologies and kind of even beat China in a way with all of the goods coming, because only 12% of our imports are from China. And whether it's toys or clips or whatever little things are there, by using biology and making some of these products within India, I think we can scale down the cost structure, and hand in hand, we should improve the environment and encourage more local manufacturing within India itself. That framework needs to go hand in hand too. Ultimately, as I said, when individuals improve, so you had the Gurukul system in India where body, mind, and soul were developed. Now your internet is your Gurukul, right? So basically, the individual should be the self-driving force. And if all individuals do that, the society will change, the government will change. All of these things will happen. Everything goes hand in hand.
Considering US has been and still is one of the largest polluters on this planet, and considering the amount of machination which is generally used in daily life over there, I'm assuming a lot of these things have been picked up by US folks and it's being used over there, or is it still in the initial phases? Can you share some information about that as well?
So all of the ideas that I have mentioned are basically in the initial phases. Like even when I mentioned about Gally, right, GALY, which is growing cotton in a lab, they have already received many awards, but their production does not start until next year. So the information that I'm giving you is new. Or even liquid CO2 machines, they are in San Francisco, Chicago, and New York City. Big hotels are using them, right? But the structure in United States is very different compared to the structure of India, where the density of the population is so much that if you had one laundromat with liquid CO2 for every 50 to 100 houses, you have created a brand new industry, a completely new industry employing at least 5 to 6% of the Indian population, not only making the machines, but manning the laundromats, right? That is assuming every city, every rural village in India were to adopt this. And because that would save 4 or 5 billion gallons of water per day. I know the US is a big polluter, China is a big polluter. third is India, but from a scale perspective, we have 18% of the population, but only about 6% of the pollution. One way to address your question, Rohit, is Gandhiji said, be the change that you want to see in the world, right? If we start comparing ourselves and saying, oh, I'm not polluting that much as somebody else, it will get us nowhere. It's kind of an attitude which we would take to say that, or because somebody is jumping in the well, that does not mean we should also jump in the well. Look at Bhutan, for example. Bhutan, 60% forest cover is demanded by their constitution in the country, and they are one of the first. I think they are one of the carbon negative countries, not even carbon neutral. They are a carbon negative country. Why shouldn't we emulate somebody like Bhutan? You see what I'm saying? So the youth of India, I mean, you included, I mean, you're the future of the country, right? So the more people in social media and more this word spreads about on these innovations and more entrepreneurship happens, collectively we can, I think, improve, reduce the cost structure, create equity in wealth as well. I don't know if I answered your question properly, Rohit, but it's a general theme I'm trying to kind of convey.
Smiley asks, what's the difference between circular economy, green trade, and how it relates to eco-labeling of products or services?
Okay. I agree there is a lot of overlap between green economy, circular economy, and so on. Think of it as a Venn diagram, right? So you have two circles overlapping each other, almost overlapping each other. So the difference is maybe like 10%, 5% difference. Circular economy basically focuses on zero waste, right? That one man's waste becomes other man's food. So what circular economy tries to do is to try to encourage every single company also to be as circular as possible. So for example, beverage company, right? Bottling company that is using plastic bottles and so on, they want you to think more and more about, maybe you go towards bioplastics, make it more biodegradable. So circular economy goes more deeper in trying to impress that there should be zero waste in the economy, whereas green economy basically comes up with some green innovations, but not address the problem more deep enough. As far as eco-labeling is concerned, that is a whole topic by itself. So we can always chat offline on that.